So in the early 80s, before we had kids, my wife and I were running a fish buying boat, a 75-foot boat, buying fish for a cannery and making weekly round trips between the cannery and this remote area in southern Alaska, and fishermen would come and sell us their fish. We got to know all the fishermen. One of the boats that sold to us, it was a couple, and she was a native gal and he was a Norwegian. And their son was named Stormy. And I said, Ethel, that's just a curious name. How did Stormy get his name? And she said, well, when I was pregnant with Stormy, he was our first child, we were beach logging and living in this little boat. It was like a 32-foot boat, very small. And what beach logging means is you rent a section of beach from the Forest Service, and that gives you the right to get the logs off the beach that have broken loose from log rafts that go to sawmills, and then you assemble your own raft, and then you can sell it to the mill. It's really hard work. These logs are typically 60 feet long, 3 and 4 feet in diameter. It might take a whole day's work to get one log off the beach. Chainsaws, jacks, it's just a lot of work. She was 8 months pregnant. She said it was really hard because, it was a really rough beach. I had to lug the chainsaw down the beach, the jack down the beach. My husband's lugging his saw, and it was really hard for somebody 8.5 months pregnant. But that was our winter money. And you don't get paid until all the logs get delivered to the sawmill. So we just finally had the raft all together after working all winter when I went into labor. And it was a really windy day, and so we called on the radio for a plane because we were across from Ketchikan about 40 miles. And the plane took about 3 tries, a float plane, took about 3 tries to get in there, and finally the plane landed. And my husband says to me, he says, Ethel, he says, I can't leave these logs. I just called the tugboat. The tugboat's coming over to pick up the raft. We're going to tow the raft to Ketchikan tonight. I'll meet you in the hospital tomorrow morning. She said, oh, okay, well, then I'll be in the hospital and I'll meet you. So she flew over in the plane, rough flight, got into Ketchikan, went into the hospital. She said the wind and the rain slashed against the windows and rattled against the hospital all night long. And she had the baby, early in the morning, healthy young boy. And her husband came in around 8 o'clock. And as soon as he walked into the room, she could see that something had happened. His face was all downcast. He was really sad about something. And the first thing she said is, she says, George, what happened? You look awful. He says, we lost the raft. Well, that means the raft broke up, because when they were towing the raft over to Ketchikan, it was so rough. The raft broke up. All the logs were lost. All their winter's hard work was lost. They'd never get paid for them. And she just sat there for a minute, taking all that in. And she says, well, don't you want to see your son? And he says, oh, yeah. And so he picked up his son. And he said, well, what do you want to name him? And she said, well, how about Stormy for the night he was born?